The moment the homeless man's scarred hand touched Sarah Mitchell's abdomen through the thin hospital gown, every machine in that MD Anderson oncology room went silent for 3 full seconds, and the tumor that had been devouring her pancreas for 14 months began to dissolve like salt in boiling water, while night shift nurse Patricia Chen watched through the window with her hand frozen on the door handle, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to explain the golden light that seemed to pulse beneath the dying woman's skin. Sarah gasped, her body arching off the bed as heat flooded through her like liquid fire that didn't burn, and the man in the torn army jacket whispered words that made no sense. "Be healed, daughter. Your faith and your tears have reached me." Then the machines beeped back to life, the oxygen saturation monitor jumping from 84 to 99 in one impossible leap, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in 427 days, the complete absence of pain. Before we go any further, I need you to do something. Write in the comments which city you're watching from, and if you or someone you love needs healing right now, write the name and the sickness. We're building a prayer army here, and hit subscribe. We're trying to reach 50,000 subscribers, so these testimonies of Jesus still moving today can touch more lives. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened that impossible night in November 2024, you need to know how Sarah Mitchell got there, to room 847 of the oncology ward, to that hospital bed where she'd been lying for 3 days waiting to die. Her husband sent home at midnight because he hadn't slept in 72 hours. Her children tucked into beds at her mother's house, 15 miles away, because no 8-year-old should watch their mother take her last breaths. You need to know about January 15th, 2024, the day Dr. Rajesh Patel sat across from Sarah in his office at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas, and said the words that shattered her world into a million pieces she'd never be able to put back together. "The imaging shows stage 4 pancreatic adenocarcinoma with metastasis to the liver and lungs. I'm sorry, Sarah. If we're aggressive with treatment, you might have 6 months, maybe 8. Sarah had been a hospice nurse for 12 years before that day. She'd held the hands of dying patients, whispered prayers over people taking their last breaths, cleaned bodies and changed sheets, and told families it was okay to let go. She knew what stage 4 pancreatic cancer meant. She knew the survival statistics, 4% at 5 years, and most of those 4% weren't really living, just existing in a fog of pain medication and nausea. She knew that when Dr. Patel said 6 months, he was being optimistic, kind, giving her hope that probably didn't exist. The textbooks she'd studied in nursing school said 3 months, maybe 4. Pancreatic cancer was the silent killer, the one that showed no symptoms until it had already won, and by the time you felt the pain in your back, the weight loss, the jaundice yellowing your skin, it had already spread like wildfire through your body, consuming everything, leaving nothing but devastated tissue in its wake. She didn't cry in Dr. Patel's office. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, and asked clinical questions like she was discussing someone else's case. "What's the treatment protocol? Folfirinox, gemcitabine. Are we looking at Whipple candidacy?" Dr. Patel shook his head gently, his dark eyes full of the sadness that oncologists learn to carry. "The tumor's wrapped around the superior mesenteric artery. Surgery isn't an option. We'll start with modified Folfirinox. See if we can shrink it enough to buy you time." Time. That's what cancer stole first, before it took your hair and your strength and your dignity. It stole your future, your children's graduations, your daughter's wedding, your son's first day of high school. Sarah was 41 years old, married to David Mitchell for 16 years, mother to Emma, who just turned 8, and Jacob, who was 11. She'd been feeling tired for months, losing weight without trying, but she chalked it up to stress from working double shifts at St. Luke's hospice unit, from managing a household, from life. The back pain that finally drove her to the doctor had felt like a pulled muscle. Just a pulled muscle. Not a death sentence. She cried in the car, sat in the MD Anderson parking garage, level 4, spot 247, and sobbed so hard she vomited into the plastic bag from the pharmacy where she'd just picked up anti-nausea medication she'd be taking for the rest of her short life. Her hands shook so violently she couldn't get the key in the ignition. She called David, her husband of 16 years, the youth pastor at Cross Point Community Church who'd married her when she was 25 and believed God had big plans for their lives together. "Baby," she whispered into the phone, throat closing around the words. "It's cancer, stage 4, pancreas. They're saying months, not years." So, what Sarah didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning of a journey that would break her completely before it rebuilt her into something she couldn't imagine. She didn't know that she'd lose 47 pounds over the next 6 months, her body consuming itself. She didn't know that her hair would fall out in clumps in the shower, clogging the drain until David had to clean it out while she sat on the bathroom floor sobbing. She didn't know that Emma would start having nightmares, crawling into bed between her parents at 3 a.m., whispering, "Mommy, are you going to die?" And Sarah wouldn't know how to answer, because the truth was yes, probably, and lying felt wrong, but the truth felt cruel. The first round of chemotherapy started on January 29th, 2024. They accessed her port, a device surgically implanted under her collarbone that looked like a small button beneath her skin, and pumped her full of chemicals designed to kill fast-growing cells, cancer cells, but also hair cells, stomach lining cells, immune system cells. Sarah sat in the infusion center for 6 hours, surrounded by other people with cancer, some bald, some wearing colorful scarves, some sleeping, some reading, all of them fighting invisible battles inside their bodies. David held her hand the entire time, praying silently, and Sarah watched the bag of clear liquid drip into her veins and wondered if this poison would save her or just make her last months miserable. The nausea hit that night like a freight train. She couldn't keep down water, couldn't keep down the anti-nausea pills, spent 3 hours vomiting until there was nothing left but bile and dry heaves that made her ribs ache. David called the oncology helpline at midnight, and they told him to bring her to the emergency room if she couldn't keep down liquids for 24 hours. She managed to sip Gatorade at 2 a.m., tiny sips, and kept it down long enough to avoid the ER. But she felt like death, like her body was rejecting the very thing trying to save it. Emma and Jacob didn't go to school the next day because Sarah couldn't get out of bed to make breakfast, couldn't drive them, couldn't do anything but lie in the dark bedroom with the shades drawn, a bucket beside the bed, shivering even though the Houston winter was mild at 68 degrees. The second round was worse. The third round, Sarah started losing her hair, finding strands on her pillow, in the shower drain, on her clothes. She shaved it all off on March 12th, sat in her bathroom with David's clippers and buzzed it down to nothing, crying as 16 inches of brown hair fell around her feet like dead leaves. Emma cried when she saw her. "Mommy, you don't look like Mommy anymore." Jacob, 11 years old and trying to be brave, said, "You look like a superhero, Mom, like you're going to fight the bad guys." But Sarah didn't feel like a superhero. She felt like a skeleton, a ghost, a woman disappearing piece by piece. If you're watching this and you or someone you love is fighting cancer right now, I need you to comment below their name and the type of cancer. We're going to pray over every single name. And hit that subscribe button. We're building a community here, people who believe Jesus still heals in 2025. By May 2024, 4 months into treatment, Sarah weighed 98 pounds. She'd started at 145. Her clothes hung off her like she was a child playing dress-up in her mother's closet. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp, eyes sunken, and when she looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The port in her chest was infected twice, requiring antibiotics and temporary removal and reinsertion. Her white blood cell count dropped so low they had to delay treatment 3 weeks, leaving her vulnerable to every virus, every bacteria. Emma caught a cold from school, and Sarah ended up in the hospital for 5 days with pneumonia, her compromised immune system unable to fight even the simplest infection. David took family leave from his job, burned through their savings, and Sarah watched their bank account drain like water through cupped hands. The medical bills were suffocating. With insurance, they owed 20% of everything, and everything was expensive. The chemotherapy drugs, $8,000 per round after insurance. The CT scans every 6 weeks to monitor tumor growth, $2,400 each. The emergency room visits for dehydration, infections, uncontrolled pain, $5,000, $7,000, $4,000. The genetic testing to see if she was a candidate for targeted therapy, $3,800. By June, they owed $127,000 to various hospitals, imaging centers, and pharmaceutical companies. David started a GoFundMe. Help Sarah Beat Cancer, mother of 2. It raised $8,400 from church members, old friends, and strangers moved by their story. It barely made a dent. They refinanced their house, took out a second mortgage, and Sarah lay awake at 3 a.m. doing math in her head, calculating how much debt she'd leave David with when she died, wondering if her life insurance would cover it, crying because she was failing her family even in death. The worst part wasn't the physical pain, though that was bad enough. The worst part was watching her children learn to live without her while she was still alive. Emma stopped asking Sarah to help with homework because Mummy was too tired. Jacob made his own lunches for school, peanut butter sandwiches every day, because he didn't know how to make anything else and didn't want to bother Dad, who was always on the phone with insurance companies or the hospital billing department. The kids got quieter, more careful around her, like she was made of glass and might shatter. They stopped having friends over. They stopped laughing as much. Sarah was stealing their childhood, and she couldn't stop it. She prayed constantly those first 6 months. Desperate prayers, bargaining prayers, angry prayers. God, please, please don't take me from my babies. They need me. They're so young. Please. She went to church every Sunday she had the strength, sat in the front row where her husband preached, and lifted her hands during worship, even when her arms ached. The church prayed over her, anointed her with oil, laid hands on her, and declared healing in Jesus' name. Women's Bible study met at her house specifically to pray for her healing. Prayer chains formed on Facebook. Hundreds of people she'd never met were praying for Sarah Mitchell in Houston, Texas, to be healed of pancreatic cancer. And the cancer kept growing. The July scans showed progression. The tumor had grown despite 4 months of chemotherapy. Metastases in her liver had doubled in size. New spots appeared in her lungs, tiny white dots on the X-ray that looked innocent but weren't. Dr. Patel changed her treatment protocol to gemcitabine plus Abraxane, a different combination, harsher side effects, but maybe more effective. "We're not giving up," he said, but his eyes told a different story. Sarah was a hospice nurse. She knew when doctors were managing expectations. She knew when they'd moved from cure to comfort care in their minds. August brought new horrors, bone pain so severe she needed morphine, a PCC line installed in her arm when the port failed again, a long catheter threaded through her vein toward her heart. She started needing oxygen at night, her lungs too compromised to maintain proper saturation while she slept. The portable oxygen concentrator became her constant companion, tubes in her nose, machine humming beside her bed, making her feel 80 years old instead of 41. She couldn't walk from the bedroom to the kitchen without getting winded. She couldn't pick up Emma. She couldn't go to Jacob's baseball games because the bleachers were too high to climb. She was dying in slow motion, and everyone could see it. Comment your city below, and if you believe Jesus can still do miracles, write, "I believe." We need to build this prayer army stronger. September was when Sarah's faith started to crack. Not break, not yet, but crack. Hairline fractures in the foundation she'd built her life on. She'd been a Christian since she was 7 years old, saved at Vacation Bible School, baptized at 12, married in church, raising her kids in church, living a life of service and prayer and faith. She'd always believed that God healed. She'd seen it, or thought she'd seen it. Spontaneous remissions, cancer that disappeared, friends who'd been given months and lived for years. She'd believed that if you prayed hard enough, believed hard enough, lived right enough, God would answer. But here she was, dying despite thousands of prayers, despite her own desperate pleading, despite her children's innocent faith. Emma prayed every night. "Dear Jesus, please make Mommy better. Please don't let her die. I need her." And Jesus was silent. Sarah started getting angry. Why her? Why not the drunk driver who'd killed a family last year and walked away without a scratch? Why not the abusive father 3 doors down who beat his kids? Why her, a woman who dedicated her life to caring for dying patients with compassion, who'd raised her children to love God, who'd never hurt anyone? Where was the fairness? Where was the justice? Where was the God who promised to answer prayers, who said, "Ask anything in my name and it will be given to you"? She'd asked. She'd asked 1,000 times, and the answer was silence. October was when Dr. Patel stopped talking about treatment and started talking about quality of life. The second-line chemotherapy wasn't working. The tumors were growing aggressively. Sarah's CA-19-9 tumor marker, a blood test that measured pancreatic cancer activity, had climbed from 487 at diagnosis to 2,147. Normal was under 37. She was running out of options. "Doctor," Patel mentioned clinical trials, experimental treatments, but his tone was gentle, the way you talk to someone you're preparing to lose. "We can try these things, Sarah, but I want you to think about what you want your last months to look like. Do you want to spend them in treatment centers, or do you want to be home with your family?" Sarah knew what he was really saying. He was saying, "You're dying, and treatment is just prolonging the inevitable while making you miserable." He was saying, "Think about hospice," and the bitter irony wasn't lost on her. She was a hospice nurse. She'd counseled countless patients about this exact decision. She'd helped them weigh the options, quality versus quantity, aggressive treatment versus peaceful dignity. But sitting on the other side of that conversation felt completely different. She wasn't ready. She was 41. Her daughter was 8. Her son was 11. She needed 5 more years minimum, enough to see Emma into middle school, Jacob into high school, enough to teach them the things a mother teaches. She needed time. What Sarah couldn't have known then was that she was being prepared for something impossible. What she couldn't see through her anger and pain and fear was that God was listening to every prayer, counting every tear, and planning something that would defy medical science and prove that he's still in the miracle business. But she had to get to the end of herself first. She had to reach the place where human effort failed completely before divine intervention could break through. November 2024 started with Sarah being admitted to MD Anderson for pain management. The bone pain had become uncontrollable, the morphine at home not strong enough, and she spent 5 days in the hospital getting her medication adjusted, her levels calibrated, her suffering managed. David brought the kids to visit on day 3, and Emma climbed carefully onto the bed, afraid to hurt Mommy, and whispered, "Are you going to come home?" Sarah promised she would, but she wasn't sure it was true. She wasn't sure she'd ever go home again. The doctors were talking about inpatient hospice, about transferring her to a facility where she could be comfortable, where the end could be peaceful. Sarah wanted to die at home, in her own bed, but she wasn't sure she could manage the pain there. She wasn't sure about anything anymore, except that she was tired, so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of hurting, tired of seeing her children's scared faces, tired of being brave when she felt like giving up. She went home on November 8th with a new pain pump, a morphine drip that delivered medication continuously through her PICC line, with extra doses she could self-administer when breakthrough pain hit. The hospice nurse who came to her house was someone Sarah had worked with 5 years ago. They hugged and both cried because the roles had reversed and neither knew what to say. The nurse set up the equipment, explained everything to David, and left information packets about end-of-life planning, advanced directives, and funeral arrangements. Sarah refused to look at them. Not yet. She wasn't ready to plan her own funeral. The next 2 weeks were a fog of morphine and sleep, and brief moments of clarity where Sarah would wake to find David sitting beside her bed, holding her hand, praying silently with tears running down his face. Emma had started seeing the school counselor for anxiety. Jacob had punched a kid at school who'd asked if his mum was going to die. Their family was falling apart, and Sarah could see it happening, but couldn't stop it. She was the center that wasn't holding, and everything was spinning into chaos around her. Share this video with someone who needs hope tonight, someone who's watching their loved one suffer and doesn't know how to pray anymore. Share it right now. November 19th, 2024 was supposed to be Sarah's last day at home. The pain had become unmanageable despite the morphine pump running at maximum dose. She was hallucinating from the medication, confused about what was real, barely eating, her organs starting to shut down from the cancer's assault. Dr. Patel called David on November 18th and said gently, "It's time. Bring her in tomorrow. We'll make her comfortable." It was hospice language, the language Sarah had used with 100 families. Make her comfortable meant keep her sedated, manage her pain, and let her die with dignity. They weren't going to fight anymore. They were going to surrender. David told the kids that night. Emma sobbed and clung to her mother, who was too weak to hold her back. Jacob punched his bedroom wall and put a hole in the drywall. Sarah heard the crash from her bed and didn't have the strength to get up and comfort him. She was failing them even now, in these final hours. She was leaving them. She'd fought with everything she had, and she was still leaving them. That night, November 19th at 11:47 p.m., Sarah prayed one last prayer. Not the desperate prayers of the last 10 months, not the bargaining or the pleading or the anger. Just a simple, broken prayer whispered into the darkness of her bedroom while David slept beside her, exhausted. God, if you're real, if you care at all, if you hear any prayers, please, I'm begging you, not for me anymore. I'm done. I'm too tired. But for my babies, for Emma and Jacob, don't let them grow up without a mother. Don't let them think you abandoned me. I don't understand why you won't heal me, but please, if you won't heal me, at least show them you're real. Show them you care. Please. She was admitted to MD Anderson at 8 a.m. on November 20th, 2024. Room 847, 8th floor, oncology ward. The room was private, quiet, with a window overlooking Houston's medical district. Sarah was transferred from wheelchair to bed by nurses who moved her gently because she was so fragile, and David helped arrange her pillows the way she liked them. The plan was to keep her comfortable, manage her pain, and let nature take its course. Dr. Patel estimated 3 days, maybe 5. Her organs were failing. Her body was giving up. The cancer had won. Emma and Jacob visited after school. Emma brought drawings she'd made, pictures of their family with everyone smiling, pictures of heaven with angels and Jesus, and a version of Mommy who wasn't sick anymore. She taped them to the wall beside Sarah's bed. Jacob brought his baseball from the last game he'd pitched, the one Sarah had been too sick to attend, and he put it on her bedside table. "I struck out 9 batters," he said, trying not to cry. "I wish you'd been there." Sarah wished she'd been there too. She wished she'd been at 1,000 things. She wished for time that didn't exist anymore. David stayed until midnight. Then the nurse gently told him he needed to go home and rest. "You haven't slept in days. Go home, shower, sleep in a real bed for a few hours. We'll call you if anything changes. What she meant was, we'll call you when she's dying. David kissed Sarah's forehead, whispered, "I love you," and left, his shoulders shaking with sobs as he walked down the hallway. Sarah watched him go through heavy eyelids, morphine making everything soft and distant. She was alone. The nurse checked on her at 1 a.m., adjusted her medication, made sure she was comfortable. "Press the call button if you need anything," she said. Sarah nodded, but she knew she wouldn't need anything. What could anyone give her now? More morphine? It didn't take away the real pain, the pain of leaving her children, the pain of prayers unanswered, the pain of feeling abandoned by the God she'd served her whole life. At 2:33 a.m. on November 21st, 2024, Sarah Mitchell was alone in room 847, staring at the ceiling, morphine drip humming beside her bed, oxygen concentrator hissing through tubes in her nose, and she was ready to die. Not peacefully, not with acceptance, but with resignation. She'd fought and lost. She was done. That's when she heard the door open. She turned her head, expecting the night nurse for a routine check. Instead, she saw a man standing in her doorway, and her first thought was that she was hallucinating, that the morphine was showing her things that weren't there, because the man in her doorway didn't belong in a hospital. He looked like he belonged on the streets, in an alley under a bridge. He was wearing a torn army surplus jacket that might have been olive green once, but was now stained with dirt, and God knows what else, the smell of street hitting her even from across the room. Body odor, alcohol, stale cigarettes, urine, wet dog. Underneath the jacket was a red hoodie, or what used to be red, now faded to rust with stains down the front. His jeans had holes in both knees, threads hanging loose, and his shoes were mismatched. A work boot on one foot, black and scuffed, and a sneaker on the other. Nike knockoff with the sole separating from the upper. But it was his appearance that froze Sarah's hand halfway to the call button. He had long, dark brown hair, matted and dirty, hanging past his shoulders in tangles with what looked like pieces of food caught in the strands. His beard was full and unkempt, streaked with grey and brown, with particles of something stuck in it, and his face was weathered and lined like he'd spent years in the sun and wind. His skin was tan beneath the dirt, and his hands, Sarah noticed his hands immediately, were rough and scarred, cuts across the knuckles, dirt under the nails, the hands of someone who'd worked hard and suffered harder. "Who are you?" Sarah whispered, her voice weak, hand still reaching for the call button. "How did you get in here?" The homeless man stepped into the room, and Sarah noticed he walked with a slight limp, favoring his left side. His eyes were wrong, or maybe they were the only thing right. Despite the filth, despite the streetwear, his eyes were impossibly clear, deep brown, almost black in the dim light of the hospital room, but with something ancient in them, something kind and sad and knowing all at once. Eyes that had seen too much, eyes that looked at her like they could see straight through her body to her soul. "I heard you've been calling for me," he said softly, his voice rough like he hadn't used it much lately, but gentle, accentless. He could have been from anywhere, everywhere. Sarah's fingers found the call button. "I don't know you. You need to leave. I'm going to call the nurse." "Sarah." She froze. He'd said her name. Just her name, but the way he said it, like he'd known her for years, like he was greeting an old friend, made her hand drop away from the button. "How do you know my name?" Her heart was pounding, the monitor beside her bed beeping faster. "Who are you?" He moved closer, that slight limp, and Sarah could smell him stronger now. The street, yes, but underneath something else, something she couldn't identify, like metal and rain and something older. Sarah Mitchell, born June 3rd, 1986 in Portland, Oregon, moved to Houston in 2006 for nursing school at UT, married David in 2008 at Crosspoint Community Church. Daughter Emma, born January 12, 2017, son Jacob, born March 8, 2013. Sarah's throat closed. How? How do you know that? Did David send you? Are you from the church? You prayed 47 minutes ago. The homeless man, he couldn't be homeless, no homeless person should know these things, stood at the foot of her bed now, hands at his sides. You said, God, if you're real, if you care at all, if you hear any prayers, please, I'm begging you, not for me anymore. I'm done. I'm too tired. But for my babies, for Emma and Jacob. Don't let them grow up without a mother. Don't let them think you abandoned me. Sarah couldn't breathe. She'd prayed that prayer alone, in her head, lips barely moving. David had been asleep. No one could have heard. No one. That's impossible. I didn't say that out loud. I thought it. How can you know what I thought? What Sarah didn't know yet was that the man standing in her room had walked through locked doors to get there. What she couldn't see yet were the scars on his wrists, hidden under dirty jacket sleeves. Scars that no homeless man should have. Scars in the shape of puncture wounds, old but deep, the kind of scars you get from something piercing straight through flesh and bone. The homeless man smiled, sad and gentle. You also prayed in July when the first treatment failed. You said, why won't you heal me? What about my babies? You prayed in September when you were angry. You called me unfair, unjust. You asked why I'd pick you to suffer. Like if Jesus still heals today, because he does, and we need 50,000 people to see these testimonies and believe again. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. I don't understand. Please, I don't understand. Who are you? How do you know these things? He moved to the side of her bed, and Sarah saw his feet for the first time. The boot, scuffed and dirty, the sneaker, sole flapping. But underneath, through a hole in the sneaker, she could see his bare foot. And on top of his foot was a scar, round and puckered, like something had been driven through it. You also prayed something you never told anyone, he said quietly. June 12th, 1986, when you were 19 years old. You were pregnant, scared, alone. You had a miscarriage at 9 weeks. You were in your dorm room bathroom, and you prayed, God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Only David knows about that pregnancy. You've never told your parents. Never told Emma and Jacob, but I heard that prayer too, Sarah. I heard you. I've always heard you. Sarah sobbed, her whole body shaking. Please stop, please. I can't. This isn't possible. And your grandmother, Dorothy Kelly, when she was dying in 1994 and you were 8 years old, she held your hand and prayed, Lord, watch over this child. Make her a healer. Let her bring comfort to the dying. You became a hospice nurse. You did exactly what she prayed. How? Sarah could barely form the word. How can you possibly know these things? The man reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, asking permission without words. May I? He asked, gesturing toward her abdomen. Sarah should have said no, should have hit the call button, screamed for the nurse, demanded security remove this homeless man from her room. But something in his eyes, something in the way he knew things no one could know, made her nod. Just a tiny nod, barely there, but it was permission. He placed his hand on her abdomen, over her hospital gown, palm flat against where the main tumor was located, wrapped around her superior mesenteric artery, choking her pancreas. His hand was warm. Not normally warm, but impossibly warm, like fire, like the sun, like heat that should burn but didn't. Heat that spread from his palm through her abdomen into her chest, down her legs, up through her throat and face. Heat that felt alive, intelligent, purposeful. And Sarah felt the tumor. She'd been able to feel it for months, a hard mass just under her ribs that pressed against her insides, that made eating impossible, that caused pain with every breath. She'd felt it growing, felt it taking over, felt it killing her one cell at a time. And now, under this homeless man's impossible touch, she felt it changing, not disappearing. She couldn't explain it because nothing in her medical training prepared her for this, but dissolving, like ice under hot water, like sugar in tea, like something solid becoming liquid, becoming nothing. The pressure against her organs eased. The pain that had been her constant companion for 427 days vanished. Just vanished, like it had never existed. The bone pain in her spine, gone. The ache in her chest from lung metastases, gone. The weakness in her muscles, replaced by strength she hadn't felt in a year. The machines beside her bed went crazy. The IV pump beeped error. The oxygen saturation monitor, which had been hovering at 84% all night, jumped to 99%. Her heart rate, elevated from fear and morphine and organ failure, steadied to a normal 68 beats per minute. And for 3 full seconds, every machine in the room went completely silent, like someone had unplugged the entire hospital. Then everything came back online, beeping normally, and Sarah gasped, sitting up in bed without pain for the first time since January. She looked at the homeless man, at his hand still on her abdomen, and she saw his wrists. The jacket sleeve had ridden up when he reached out, and there on his left wrist was a scar. Not a straight line from a knife or an accident, but a round scar, puckered, old but deep, like something had been driven through his wrist from one side to the other. A puncture wound, the kind of wound you get from a nail. Sarah looked at his right wrist, same scar, same circular puncture wound. Her eyes went to his feet, the boot, the sneaker, with a hole. Through the hole, she saw another scar on top of his foot, same type. Same old puncture wound. She looked at his face, at his eyes, and suddenly the dirt and the smell and the homeless appearance didn't matter, because she was seeing something else, someone who'd been there all along, but she'd been too blind to recognize. "Do you want to be healed, Sarah?" he asked gently, palm still warm against her abdomen. "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "God, yes. But it's too late. The cancer is everywhere. It's killing me. I've been dying for 10 months. He smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful smile Sarah had ever seen. "It's never too late. That's not how I work. I told you before. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. Do you believe this?" "I don't know," Sarah whispered honestly. "I stopped knowing what I believe. I prayed for 10 months, and you never answered." "I answered every prayer, Sarah. Sometimes the answer is wait. Sometimes the answer is not yet. Sometimes I'm preparing something bigger than what you asked for. You asked to be healed. I'm about to heal you. But more than that, I'm about to prove to you and your children and your husband and every person who hears this story that I'm still here. I never left. I never will." He removed his hand, and Sarah looked down at her abdomen. Through the thin hospital gown she could see her skin. It looked different somehow, healthier. The yellow tinge of jaundice that had been creeping in for weeks was gone. Her skin looked normal, pink, alive. She looked back at the man. "Who are you?" He pulled back his jacket sleeves, showing both wrists clearly now. Old scars, puncture wounds on both wrists. He sat on the edge of her bed, and the movement pulled up his jeans slightly. Scars on both feet, visible through the hole in the sneaker and over the top of the boot. "Whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me," he quoted softly. "You spent 12 years caring for the dying, Sarah. Washing them, feeding them, holding their hands, praying over them when no one else would. You treated homeless patients in hospice with the same dignity as millionaires. You never turned anyone away. You served me, without knowing it, every single time." "Matthew 25, Sarah whispered. "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." Comment below right now, "Lord, let me see you." Write it in the comments, and write your city. If you need healing, if someone you love is dying right now, write their name and what they need healed. We're praying over every single comment tonight. And whatever you needed, when you cried out, I came," he continued. "I always come, Sarah. Sometimes you just don't recognize me. Sometimes I look like the nurse who held your hand during chemotherapy. Sometimes I look like the friend who brought meals when you were too sick to cook. Sometimes I look like your husband who never gave up, who held you when you wanted to die. And sometimes—" He gestured at himself, at the homeless appearance, at the dirt and smell and streetwear. "Sometimes I look like this because you needed to see that I hear the desperate prayers. I hear the ones who think I've forgotten them. I hear the ones who are dying alone at 2 a.m. in hospital rooms." "Jesus," Sarah breathed. "I never left you, Sarah. Not during the diagnosis, not during the chemotherapy, not when you were angry at me, not when you stopped believing I could heal you. I was there every second. I felt every pain. I caught every tear. I counted every prayer. And tonight I came like this." He gestured at his homeless appearance again. "Because sometimes people only see me when I'm desperate, broken, least expected. You served people like this your whole life. Now I'm serving you, looking like this, to show you that the least of these, the forgotten, the homeless, the dying, that's where I am. Always." A nurse walked past in the hallway, her cart rattling. Sarah turned her head toward the sound for just 1 second, and when she looked back, the man was gone. The bed was empty where he'd been sitting. The door hadn't opened. The window was sealed. 8th floor. Impossible to open. He'd simply vanished. Sarah jumped out of bed, forgetting she couldn't walk, forgetting the weakness and pain that had defined her life for 10 months. She moved without thinking, without pain, and ran to the door, jerking it open. "Wait!" she shouted into the hallway. "The homeless man! Where did he go?" Night nurse Patricia Chen looked up from the nurse's station, startled. "Mrs. Mitchell, you need to get back in bed." "What homeless man?" "The one who just left my room. Long hair, beard, torn jacket. He was just in here. He touched me. Sarah realized how insane she sounded. She looked down at herself, at her bare feet on the cold hospital linoleum, at the fact that she was standing, walking, breathing without oxygen, without pain. The oxygen tubes were still hanging from the concentrator by her bed, but they were no longer in her nose. When had she removed them? She didn't remember removing them. "Honey, no one's been in your room since I checked on you at 1 a.m., Patricia said gently, walking towards Sarah. "It's almost 3 now. You've been alone. Are you feeling okay? Sometimes the morphine can cause hallucinations." "Check the security footage," Sarah demanded. "Check it right now. He walked through my door at 2:33. He was in my room for—" She checked the clock. 14 minutes. He had to have walked past your station. Patricia guided Sarah back into her room, concerned. "Let's get you back in bed, okay? I'll call Dr. Patel, have him adjust your medication if you're seeing things." "I'm not seeing things." Sarah pulled away from the nurse's gentle grip. "I'm not hallucinating, and I'm not getting back in bed because I don't need to. Patricia, look at me, really look at me." Patricia looked, and Sarah saw the exact moment comprehension started to dawn in the nurse's eyes. Sarah was standing straight, no longer hunched over in pain. Her skin wasn't yellow. Her breathing was easy and deep without oxygen support. She looked different somehow, healthier, alive. "How are you standing?" Patricia whispered. "Mrs. Mitchell, you couldn't walk to the bathroom 6 hours ago without help." "Because I'm healed." Sarah's voice broke on the words. "He healed me. Jesus healed me. He came disguised as a homeless man, and he touched me. And the cancer is gone. It's gone. I can feel it. It's gone." Who breathed? What Sarah didn't know yet was that the security footage would later be reviewed by hospital security and Houston police, and they would find something impossible. The footage from 2:30 a.m. to 3 a.m. on the 8th floor would show her door clearly. And in 30 minutes of footage, the door never opened. Not once, not even when Sarah ran into the hallway screaming about a homeless man. The door remained closed the entire time, and yet Sarah was suddenly in the hallway. The footage made no sense. The police would file it away as a technical glitch, but the security guard who watched it, a 20-year veteran named Marcus Thompson, would tell his pastor about it on Sunday, and his pastor would tell him, "Some things aren't meant to be explained, Marcus. Some things are just meant to be believed." Patricia, standing in Sarah's room at 3:02 a.m. on November 21st, 2024, didn't know what to think. She'd been a nurse for 17 years. She'd seen a lot. Spontaneous remissions, unexpected recoveries, medical miracles that defied explanation. But she'd never seen someone in Sarah's condition. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, multiple organ metastases, days from death, suddenly standing and walking and breathing normally. It was impossible. "Mrs. Mitchell," Patricia said carefully, "I need to call Dr. Patel, and we need to run some tests. Can you get back in bed for me, please?" Sarah got back in bed, but she didn't lie down. She sat up, straight-backed, breathing easily, and she looked at Patricia with eyes that were clear and bright for the first time in months. "Run whatever tests you want. You'll see. He healed me. Jesus healed me. Matthew 25:40. Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. That's why he came looking homeless. That's why he looked broken. To show me that's where he is. That's where he's always been." Patricia called Dr. Patel's emergency line. He was sleeping at home, but when Patricia explained that Sarah Mitchell was out of bed, walking, breathing without oxygen, and insisting she'd been healed by a homeless man who vanished, Dr. Patel told Patricia he'd be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 18, wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, hair uncombed, and when he walked into Sarah's room, she was sitting cross-legged on the bed, eating Jell-O from the tray the night kitchen had sent up, something she hadn't been able to keep down in weeks. "Sarah," Dr. Patel said slowly, "tell me what happened." She told him everything. The homeless man, the impossible knowledge, the scars, the touch, the heat, the vanishing. Dr. Patel listened without interrupting, his face carefully neutral, and when Sarah finished, he said simply, "Let me examine you." He checked her vitals. Blood pressure, 118/76, normal. Heart rate, 70, normal. Oxygen saturation, 98% on room air, no supplemental oxygen. Respiratory rate, 14, easy and unlabored. He palpated her abdomen, where the tumor had been large enough to feel through her skin. Nothing. No hardness, no mass. He looked in her eyes. No yellowing, no jaundice. He checked her PICC line access site. Clean, no infection. Everything was normal. Everything was impossible. "I want to run imaging," Dr. Patel said quietly. "CT scan, PET scan, full labs. Can we do that right now?" "It's 3:30 in the morning," Patricia pointed out. "I don't care. Wake up the radiologist. Tell them it's an emergency. I need to see what's happening inside this patient." Dr. Patel's voice was shaking slightly. In 23 years of oncology, he'd never seen anything like this. Share this video right now with someone who's dying, someone who's in a hospital room tonight, thinking God has forgotten them. Share it right now. By 4:15 a.m., Sarah was in the CT scanner, the machine humming around her as it took detailed images of her chest, abdomen, and pelvis. The radiologist, Dr. Lee, was grumpy at being called in at 4 a.m. until he started looking at the images on his screen. Then he was silent. Then he called Dr. Patel into the reading room. "Where's the tumor?" Dr. Lee asked, pointing at the screen. "In the pancreas, wrapped around the SMA," Dr. Patel said. "No, I mean, where is it? It's not there." They both stared at the screen. Sarah's pancreas was clearly visible, normal in appearance, no tumor. The superior mesenteric artery was clear, no encasement. They scrolled through the images. Liver, clear, no metastases. Lungs, clear, no nodules. The cancer was gone. Completely gone. This has to be a mistake, Dr. Lee said. We need to rescan. This must be someone else's images. They rescanned. Same result. Sarah's name on the images, date and timestamp, showing November 21st, 2024, 4:17 a.m., and absolutely no evidence of cancer. Not shrunken tumors, not reduced metastases, no cancer at all, as if it had never existed. Dr. Patel pulled up Sarah's CT from 5 days ago, November 16th, the scan that had shown massive tumor burden and led to the decision for inpatient hospice. He put the two scans side by side on the monitors. November 16th, cancer everywhere, tumors visible in pancreas, liver and lungs. November 21st, nothing, clear, normal. This is impossible, Dr. Lee whispered. I know, Dr. Patel said. They ran a PET scan at 5 a.m., which looks for metabolically active cancer cells. The radioactive tracer lit up areas of active cancer. Sarah's PET scan was completely negative. No uptake anywhere. No active cancer cells in her entire body. Labs drawn at 5:30 a.m. showed CA-19-9 tumor marker at 11. It had been 2,147 5 days ago. Normal range is 037. Sarah's tumor marker was normal. Dr. Patel walked back to Sarah's room at 6:15 a.m. as dawn was breaking over Houston. Sarah was awake, sitting up, looking out the window at the sunrise. And when Dr. Patel entered, she turned to him with a knowing smile. "It's gone, isn't it?" she said. "Yes." Dr. Patel's voice cracked. "Sarah, the cancer is gone, all of it. Tumors, metastases, everything. Your CA-19-9 is normal. Your imaging is clear. I don't have a medical explanation for this." "I know you don't," Sarah said gently, "because there isn't one. This wasn't medical. This was divine." "I've been an oncologist for 23 years, Dr. Patel said, sitting heavily in the chair beside her bed. "I've seen spontaneous remissions, rare, but they happen. But I've never seen this. Tumors don't disappear in 4 hours. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer doesn't just vanish overnight. This is—" He searched for a word. "Miraculous." "That's the only word for it. Matthew 25:40, Sarah said. "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." He came as a homeless man, Dr. Patel. Jesus came looking like someone society ignores, someone people cross the street to avoid, because that's where he said he'd be, in the least of these. And he touched me and he healed me, and now I have to figure out why. Dr. Patel called a hospital board review for later that week. Sarah Mitchell's case was documented officially as spontaneous remission of stage 4 pancreatic adenocarcinoma, etiology unknown. In medical terms, spontaneous remission means the cancer went away without treatment, without explanation. It happens so rarely that when it does, doctors write papers about it, study it, try to understand it. But there's no understanding Sarah's case. Before and after imaging told an impossible story. Stage 4 cancer on November 16th. No cancer on November 21st. 5 days apart. Medically impossible, spiritually undeniable. David arrived at 7 a.m., expecting to find his wife sedated and dying. Instead, he found her eating breakfast, sitting up, laughing with Patricia about something on TV. He stopped in the doorway, confused, and Sarah looked up and smiled at him, a real smile, the first one he'd seen in months. "Hey, baby," she said. "Sarah? What's happening? Why aren't you—" "You look healed," she finished. "I'm healed, David. Jesus came last night. He came disguised as a homeless man, and he touched me and he healed me. The cancer is gone." Dr. Patel confirmed it. "It's gone." David stood frozen for 3 full seconds, his brain trying to process what he was hearing. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees beside her bed, sobbing so hard his whole body shook. Sarah climbed out of bed and knelt beside him on the floor, holding him, both of them crying, and Patricia quietly left the room to give them privacy. "The kids," David gasped through sobs. "Oh my God, the kids. Sarah, Emma, and Jacob. They prayed every night, every single night. Please heal Mommy. They never stopped believing." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I stopped believing. But they didn't. And Jesus heard them. He heard their prayers. He heard mine. He heard yours. He heard everyone's. And he answered. Not the way I expected, not the way I wanted, but in his time, in his way, and now I have to live the rest of my life asking why me? Why did he heal me when so many others are still dying? What am I supposed to do with this miracle?" David pulled back and looked at his wife's face, really looked at it. The color had returned to her cheeks. The sunken hollows under her eyes were filling out. She looked alive. She looked like Sarah again, not the ghost she'd become. "You tell everyone," he said firmly. "You tell everyone what Jesus did. You tell everyone that he's still healing, still performing miracles, still showing up when we think he's abandoned us. That's what you do with this." Emma and Jacob came to the hospital after school that afternoon, their grandmother bringing them, preparing them for what they thought would be their mother's final days. Emma clutched a stuffed bear she'd had since she was 3, her comfort object. Jacob walked with his shoulders hunched, trying to be brave. Their grandmother, Carol, Sarah's mother, had tears in her eyes as they rode the elevator to the 8th floor. They walked into room 847, expecting to find Sarah in bed, pale and dying. Instead, they found her standing by the window, wearing real clothes instead of a hospital gown, looking out at Houston, and when she heard them enter, she turned and smiled. "Mommy!" Emma dropped the stuffed bear and ran across the room, and Sarah caught her daughter in her arms and lifted her, actually lifted her, something she hadn't had the strength to do in 6 months. Emma wrapped her legs around Sarah's waist and sobbed into her mother's neck, and Sarah held her tight, crying and laughing at the same time. Jacob stood frozen, staring. "Mom, you're standing, you look—" "I'm healed, Jacob." Sarah put Emma down and walked to her son, who was almost as tall as she was now, and she pulled him into a hug. He resisted for half a second, then collapsed against her, crying the way he hadn't let himself cry in months. "Jesus healed me, baby. I'm not dying. I'm going to see you graduate high school. I'm going to see you both grow up. I'm going to be here." "How?" Jacob pulled back, looking at his mother's face, touching her cheek like he needed to confirm she was real. "The doctor said, they said you only had days. How?" "Jesus came to my room last night," Sarah said, kneeling, so she was eye level with both children. "He came disguised as a homeless man, someone who looked like he needed help, and he touched me, and he healed me. The cancer is gone, all of it. Dr. Patel confirmed it with scans and tests. It's a miracle, babies. A real miracle." Emma's eyes went wide. "Jesus came here, to the hospital. What did he look like?" Sarah described him, the torn jacket, the long matted hair, the beard, the mismatched shoes. She described his eyes, ancient and kind. She described the scars on his wrists and feet, the marks of crucifixion that proved who he was. She told them everything except the private knowledge he'd revealed about her past, things children didn't need to know. And when she finished, Emma said solemnly, "We prayed every night, me and Jacob. We never stopped. I know you did, baby, and Jesus heard every prayer. He always hears. Even when we think he's not listening, he hears. If you're watching this and you have children who are praying for something impossible right now, comment, 'Jesus hears children's prayers because he does. He hears every word from every child's mouth.'" Carol, Sarah's mother, stood in the doorway crying silently. She'd been preparing to bury her daughter. She'd already looked at caskets online, already imagined the funeral, already wondered how she'd help David raise Emma and Jacob without their mother. And now Sarah was standing, healthy, holding her children. And Carol didn't understand, but she believed. She believed because the evidence was standing in front of her, alive. Sarah was released from the hospital on November 22nd, less than 24 hours after being admitted for end-of-life care. Doctor, Patel wrote in her discharge summary, patient admitted for palliative care with terminal stage IV pancreatic adenocarcinoma. Imaging obtained morning of 11/21/24 shows complete resolution of all previously documented malignancies. Tumor markers normalized. Physical examination normal. Patient discharged home in excellent condition. Diagnosis: spontaneous remission, etiology unknown. Patient reports religious experience. No medical explanation available. The first thing Sarah did when she got home was search for the homeless man. She couldn't let it go. She needed to find him, thank him, understand what had happened. She described him to David in detail, and David sketched while she talked, his artistic skills creating a surprisingly accurate portrait. Long dark hair, full beard, weathered face, kind eyes. They made copies of the sketch. Starting November 23rd, Sarah visited every homeless encampment in Houston. She went to the ones under I-45, under the bridges, in the parks. She carried the sketch and showed it to everyone. "Have you seen this man?" Most people said no. Some said maybe. One woman said, "Honey, half the men out here look like that." But no one could identify him specifically. She went to homeless shelters, Star of Hope, Salvation Army, Avenue 360, every shelter in the Houston area. She showed the sketch to staff and residents. She told her story. "A homeless man came to my hospital room, healed my cancer, then vanished. People looked at her like she was crazy, but they took copies of the sketch, said they'd keep an eye out. She went to soup kitchens, to the places that served free meals. She volunteered so she could be there, so she could see faces, search for the man with the scars on his wrists. She served hundreds of people over 3 weeks. She saw suffering, addiction, mental illness, desperation. She saw Jesus in every face, or tried to, but she didn't see the specific face that had touched her in room 847. On December 14th, 2024, Sarah was volunteering at Bread of Life Soup Kitchen in downtown Houston, serving chili and cornbread to a line of people that stretched out the door. An older homeless veteran, maybe 60, with white hair and a grizzled beard, came through the line, and Sarah served him with a smile. He looked at her carefully and said, "You're that lady, aren't you? The one looking for the homeless Jesus?" Sarah's heart jumped. "Yes. Have you seen him? Do you know him?" The veteran chuckled, a raspy sound. "Lady, I've been on these streets 15 years. I know most everybody, and I ain't never seen the man you're describing. But I'll tell you this." He leaned closer, and Sarah smelled alcohol and cigarettes and street on him. "Sometimes he shows up looking like us, checking if y'all still care about the least of these. That's what the Bible says, right? Matthew 25? When you serve us, you serve him. Maybe he came to you looking homeless, 'cause he wanted to remind you where he lives, down here, with us, the forgotten ones." Sarah stared at the veteran, tears forming. "So you think I'll never find him?" "I think you find him every time you serve someone like me," the veteran said gently. "I think he's here right now, in this room, in all these faces. You just gotta have eyes to see." He took his chili and cornbread and shuffled to a table, and Sarah stood frozen, ladle in hand, understanding washing over her. She wasn't supposed to find the specific homeless man. She was supposed to find Jesus in every homeless person. That was the point. That was the lesson. "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." Jesus wasn't hiding in one specific homeless man she could track down and thank. Jesus was in all of them, waiting to see if she'd serve them the way she'd served him. Write in the comments, "Lord, let me see you in the least of these." Write it right now, and subscribe if you believe Jesus is still speaking through the homeless, the forgotten, the broken. Christmas 2024 was different than any Christmas the Mitchell family had imagined. They'd thought they'd be spending it planning a funeral, or worse, that Sarah would already be gone. Instead, Sarah was healthy, cancer-free, cooking Christmas dinner, watching Emma and Jacob open presents, crying with gratitude for every normal moment she'd thought she'd lost forever. On January 15th, 2025, exactly 1 year after her diagnosis, Sarah had follow-up imaging. CT scans, PET scan, full labs, doctor. Patel reviewed the results with her in his office, the same office where he'd given her a death sentence 12 months earlier. "Still clear," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "No evidence of disease. Sarah, I've documented your case in medical journals. I've presented it at conferences, and I still don't have an explanation. Medically, this shouldn't be possible." "It's not medical," Sarah said gently. "It's divine, and I think I finally understand why it happened to me." She started a ministry called Cancer Prayers. Every week, she visited MD Anderson and other Houston hospitals, asking oncology nurses to connect her with terminal patients, people who'd been given days or weeks, people who'd lost hope. She sat with them, held their hands, told them her story, and prayed over them, and healing started happening. Not every time, not even most of the time, but more than coincidence could explain. A man with stage 4 lung cancer, tumors shrank by 60% after Sarah prayed with him. A woman with glioblastoma, inoperable brain tumor, went into unexpected remission after Sarah visited her room. A teenager with leukemia, suddenly his bone marrow started producing healthy cells after months of failure. Doctors had no explanations. Sarah told them it wasn't her. It was Jesus working through her prayers, through her testimony, through her willingness to serve the dying the way she'd been served. Emma's 9th birthday happened on January 12, 2025. Sarah had thought she'd miss it, thought she'd be dead before her daughter turned 9. Instead, she threw Emma a big party, invited 20 kids, baked a princess cake from scratch, and cried happy tears while everyone sang happy birthday. Emma blew out her candles, and her wish, she told everyone later, was "Thank you, Jesus, for bringing Mommy back." By March 2025, Sarah's story had spread. Local news picked it up. Houston woman's terminal cancer vanishes after visit from mysterious homeless man. Churches invited her to speak. She told her testimony at Crosspoint Community, where David preached, and 17 people gave their lives to Christ that day. She spoke at Lakewood, at Second Baptist, at small churches and megachurches, and everywhere she went, people cried and prayed and started looking for Jesus in unexpected places. The medical debt that had been crushing them, $340,000 owed to various hospitals and treatment centers, mysteriously disappeared. In February 2025, Sarah received a letter from MD Anderson Billing Department. "We're writing to inform you that your account balance of $186,400 has been forgiven due to a clerical error in billing codes. You owe nothing." Similar letters came from other hospitals. Billing error, insurance reprocessing, charity care qualification. One by one, the debts vanished until the Mitchells owed nothing. David called it another miracle. Sarah knew it was. She kept a red hoodie in her closet, bought from a thrift store, similar to the one Jesus had worn. She hung it where she could see it every morning, a reminder that Jesus comes disguised as the least of these, and she needed to have eyes to see him. In April 2025, Sarah went back to work, but not as a hospice nurse. She couldn't go back to just managing symptoms and planning deaths, not after experiencing resurrection. Instead, she started working full-time with Cancer Prayers Ministry, visiting hospitals, praying with terminal patients, telling her story again and again. Some people believed her, some thought she was crazy, some thought it was spontaneous remission that had nothing to do with God. Sarah didn't argue, she just told what happened to her and let people decide. Jacob made the middle school baseball team in spring 2025, and Sarah was at every game, sitting in the bleachers, cheering louder than anyone. The first game, Jacob pitched a no-hitter through 5 innings, and after the game, he ran to Sarah and hugged her tight and whispered, "I played good because you were watching, Mom. I knew you'd be here." Sarah cried because she'd almost missed all of this. The normal moments, the everyday miracles of watching her children grow. One evening in May 2025, 6 months after her healing, Sarah was volunteering at Star of Hope Homeless Shelter, serving dinner. The line was long and she was tired, but she served each person with a smile, making eye contact, asking names, treating everyone with dignity. A man came through the line wearing a red hoodie, and Sarah's heart stopped. She looked at his face. Not the same man, different features, younger, but something in his eyes made her pause. "God bless you," the man said, taking the plate of food from her hands. "What's your name?" Sarah asked. "Matthew," he said. "Matthew," Sarah repeated, thinking of Matthew 25:40. "Can I ask you something? Do you know a man, homeless like you, maybe 30s, long dark hair, beard, torn army jacket? He would have been around MD Anderson Hospital back in November." Matthew looked at her carefully, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Lady, I don't know that specific man, but I know this. Jesus walks these streets. He always has. He looks like us." He gestured at himself, at his homeless appearance. "Because he wants to see who still cares. You looking for him?" "I found him once," Sarah said, "or he found me, and I'm spending the rest of my life trying to find him again." "Then you'll find him everywhere," Matthew said. "That's how it works. Once you see him once, you see him everywhere, in every face that needs help, every person society ignores. That's where he lives." Matthew took his food and walked away, and Sarah wondered if she'd just met Jesus again, or if she was seeing him in every homeless person now, which was maybe the same thing. If this story is touching your heart, if you're starting to see Jesus in unexpected places, comment, "Open my eyes," and hit that subscribe button. We're trying to reach people who need hope tonight. July 2025, 8 months after the healing, Sarah was invited to speak at a medical conference in Dallas about spontaneous remission. Dr. Patel presented her case to a room full of oncologists, showing the before and after imaging, the timeline, the impossibility of it. Then Sarah spoke, telling her story, describing the homeless man, the scars, the heat, the healing. When she finished, the room was silent. Then a doctor in the back row stood and said, "I'm a man of science, but I'm also a man of faith, and I cannot explain Sarah Mitchell medically. I can only explain her spiritually. What happened to her defies everything we know about pancreatic cancer. I believe it was divine intervention." Not everyone agreed. Some doctors walked out. Some whispered about spontaneous remission statistics, rare but documented. But 17 doctors approached Sarah afterward, telling her about their own unexplained cases, their own possible miracles that they'd never called miracles before because medicine doesn't have language for the divine. One doctor, an older woman named Dr. Ruth Santos, held Sarah's hands and said with tears in her eyes, 20 years ago I had stage 4 ovarian cancer. I was dying. And one night in the hospital, I had a dream of Jesus touching me. I woke up healed. The cancer was gone. I never told anyone because I thought they'd think I was crazy. Thank you for being brave enough to tell your story. You just gave me permission to tell mine." Sarah hugged her and whispered, tell everyone Jesus still heals. Tell everyone he's not done with miracles." The medical journals that published Sarah's case, Journal of Oncology, New England Journal of Medicine case reports, used careful language: spontaneous remission, unexplained resolution, etiology unknown. They documented the facts: stage 4 pancreatic adenocarcinoma with metastases, terminal prognosis, complete resolution of all disease within hours. But they couldn't explain it. Medicine doesn't have tools to measure divine intervention. It only has tools to document what happened, not why. Sarah kept the hospital bracelet from November 20th, 2024, the day she was admitted to die. She wore it sometimes under her watch, a reminder of what she'd been saved from. Room 847, Mitchell Sarah Dobwer 603 1986. The bracelet they put on people who are about to leave this world. Except Sarah didn't leave. She was brought back, pulled from the edge of death by scarred hands that smelled like the street. In August 2025, Sarah was serving at a homeless shelter when she saw a man across the room in a torn army jacket. Her heart raced. She walked toward him, weaving between tables, pulse pounding. When she got close, the man turned around. It wasn't him. Different face, different eyes. Just another homeless man in a torn jacket. The man looked at her curiously. "You okay, lady?" "Yes," Sarah said, smiling through sudden tears. "I just thought you were someone else. Can I get you some food?" She served him like he was Jesus, because maybe he was. You never know. Comment below right now. Write your city and write Jesus. Come find me. If you need a miracle tonight, if you're dying and losing hope, write it down. We're praying over every single comment, every single one. Sarah's medical chart at MD Anderson Cancer Center became something doctors showed medical students as an example of the unexplainable. "This is Sarah Mitchell," they'd say, pulling up her imaging. Stage 4, pancreatic adenocarcinoma, terminal prognosis, complete spontaneous remission overnight. We cannot explain this medically. It remains one of the most dramatic cases of spontaneous remission in modern oncology literature. Some professors stopped there. Others added quietly, "The patient attributes her healing to divine intervention. Make of that what you will." The truth Sarah lived every single day, was that Jesus had touched her. Not metaphorically, not spiritually in some abstract sense, but physically. His hand on her abdomen, his palm impossibly warm, his scars visible and real. She'd been healed by hands that had been pierced by nails 2,000 years ago, hands that had touched lepers and blind men and dead girls and brought them all back to life. Those same hands had touched her in room 847 at 2:47 a.m. on November 21st, 2024, and cancer that should have killed her had simply dissolved. And the question she lived with every day was, why me? Why did Jesus heal me when children are dying of cancer right now? When mothers are being buried? When fathers are saying goodbye to their kids? When good people who pray desperately die anyway? Why was I chosen for a miracle? She didn't have an answer, but she had a purpose. She would spend the rest of her life telling people that Jesus is still healing, still performing miracles, still showing up in hospital rooms and homeless shelters, and anywhere people are desperate enough to cry out to him. She would look for him in the least of these. She would serve the homeless and the dying and the forgotten as if every single one of them was Christ disguised, because they were. Matthew 25:40. Sarah had it tattooed on her wrist in small letters, right where Jesus' scars had been. "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." She looked at it every day. She lived by it. It was her mission statement, her purpose, her reason for being healed. She wasn't healed just to live. She was healed to tell everyone that the least of these, the homeless, the dying, the forgotten, the broken, that's where Jesus lives. That's where he's always lived. By December 2025, 1 year after her healing, Sarah had prayed with over 300 terminal cancer patients. 17 had experienced complete remission. 43 had exceeded their prognosis expectations. All of them had found peace, even the ones who eventually died, because Sarah told them about a homeless man with scars on his wrists who proved that Jesus hasn't stopped caring about human suffering. The homeless man Jesus. Sarah never saw him again. Not in that specific form. But she saw him every week in the faces of people she served. She saw him in the eyes of dying patients who found hope through her story. She saw him in her children's faces when they prayed before meals, thanking God for healing their mother. She saw him everywhere, once she learned how to look, and sometimes when she was serving at a shelter or praying with a dying patient or just living her normal life, she'd feel warmth on her abdomen, right where Jesus had touched her. Just for a second, impossible heat that didn't burn. And she'd know he was there. He was always there. He'd never left. Emma and Jacob grew up with a mother who'd been resurrected. They knew, in a way most children don't, that miracles are real, that Jesus answers prayers, that death doesn't always win. Emma wanted to be a doctor when she grew up, inspired by Dr. Patel and the medical team that documented her mother's impossible healing. Jacob wanted to be a pastor like his dad, to tell people about the God who heals. Both children knew they were living in the aftermath of a miracle, and it shaped everything about them. David preached different after Sarah's healing. Before, he'd preached about faith and hope in abstract terms. After, he preached about a God who shows up in hospital rooms disguised as homeless men, who touches the dying and brings them back to life, who hears every desperate prayer even when the answer is wait, or not yet, or I have something bigger planned. His sermons had authority now because he'd watched his wife die and watched Jesus bring her back. The Mitchells' marriage, which had been strained to breaking point during Sarah's illness, became stronger than ever. They'd walked through the valley of the shadow of death together, and they'd seen resurrection on the other side. Nothing could shake them now. They'd already survived the worst thing they could imagine, and they'd seen God move in the middle of it. Final words. Sarah Mitchell is alive today, December 2025, cancer-free for over a year. She's healthy, active, serving, and telling everyone who will listen that Jesus Christ is still in the healing business. She's watching her children grow up, celebrating every normal day as the miracle it is, and looking for Jesus in every face that society ignores. Would you recognize Jesus if he walked into your hospital room tonight? If he looked homeless, dirty, desperate? Would you let him touch you? Or would you reach for the call button and have security remove God from your room? How many times has he already been there, in the face of the nurse who held your hand, the friend who wouldn't stop praying, the stranger who smiled at you on your worst day? How many times have you walked past Jesus on the street because he looked like someone who needed help instead of someone who could give it? Matthew 25:40 says, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Jesus lives in the least of these, the homeless, the dying, the forgotten, the broken. That's where you'll find him. That's where he's always been. Psalm 103, 2-3 says, "Praise the Lord, my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your sins and heals all your diseases." He heals, present tense, still healing, still forgiving, still performing miracles in 2025. James 5:15 promises, "The prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. The Lord will raise them up." Keep praying, keep believing, keep asking, because Jesus hears every desperate prayer even when you think he's silent. Comment below, "Lord, let me see you." Write your city. If you need healing, write the name and the sickness. We're praying over every comment. We're building a prayer army of people who believe Jesus still moves in impossible ways. Hit subscribe if you believe Jesus still heals in 2025. We're trying to reach 50,000 subscribers so these testimonies can touch more lives, so more people can hear that God hasn't stopped performing miracles, so more dying patients can find hope in hospital rooms at 2 a.m. when they think no one cares. Share this with someone who's losing hope tonight, someone sitting in a hospital room, someone who's been given months to live, someone who thinks God has forgotten them. Share this right now. This is a fictional story, inspired by real biblical principles of healing and the profound truth that Jesus often comes disguised as the least of these. While these specific events and characters are dramatized for narrative impact, they represent the countless documented medical miracles that happen when people pray in faith, and the biblical truth that Christ identifies himself with the suffering and marginalized. Matthew 25:40 is real. Jesus is real. And he's still in the healing business, still showing up in unexpected ways, still touching the dying and bringing them back to life, still hearing the desperate prayers of mothers and fathers and children who refuse to give up. The God who healed the sick 2,000 years ago is the same God who heals today. Don't ever stop believing that. Don't ever stop praying. Don't ever stop looking for Jesus in the face of the least of these, because that's where you'll find him. That's where he promised to be, and he keeps his promises, always.